The vessel known as the Echo Catcher did not travel through space, but rather listened its way through the folds of it. It was a craft forged from resonating alloys and sympathetic crystals, its structure less a solid object and more a sustained and a complex chord given physical form. To the uninitiated, its passage was silent, but to its conductor, Orin, it was a symphony of navigation. His consciousness was not confined to a biological form, but was woven into the very superstructure of the ship, a living sensorium attuned to the faint, lingering vibrations of cosmic history. His people, the ceaseless choir, did not conquer or colonize. They listened. Their grand purpose, passed down through generations of conductors, was to compile the final verse, a perfect sonic recreation of the universe's entire history, from the first percussive blast of creation to the final, fading hum of entropy. Every supernova was a symbol crash, every planetary formation a slow, grinding cello note, every civilization a complex and chaotic melody. Their arrival in the Sol system was intended to be a routine recording session. A species-designated humanity had recently begun to broadcast, their crude radio waves and energetic signatures a sign of a new instrument joining the orchestra. Orin had prepared his junior harmonists for the task, anticipating the usual flurry of unstructured, energetic noise, the vibrant, clumsy sounds of a civilization learning to play its part on the cosmic stage. He expected to isolate the themes of their wars, the rhythms of their industry, the rising and falling tones of their nascent global communication. It was a familiar, of always unique, composition to capture. But as the Echo Catcher settled into the acoustic shadow of the system's outer gas giants, it was met not with a cacophony, but with a single, impossibly pure tone. It was not the silence of a dead system or the quiet whisper of a pre-sentient world. This was a deliberate, sustained, and monolithic note, a perfect A-flat that seemed to emanate from the third planet, so powerful and absolute that it dampened all other stray frequencies. It was the sonic equivalent of a perfectly white, featureless canvas where a vibrant painting should have been. Analysis. Alara. Orin resonated, his thought query a clear, questioning chime sent to his first harmonic. Alara's own resonant signature returned as a series of troubled, dissonant vibrations. The system is vibrant, conductor. The third world radiates the thermal and atmospheric energy of a complex society. We detect infrastructure, movement, the echoes of immense construction. Yet all of it is in perfect tune with the primary chord. There are no dissonant frequencies, no stray communications. It's as if an entire species is humming a single, unending note. It feels less like they are hiding, and more like they are performing a piece that has no end. This was an anomaly of the highest order, a violation of the fundamental laws of societal acoustics. A civilization's complexity was defined by its dissonance, by the interplay of countless individual sounds. To achieve such perfect, absolute harmony was either an act of impossible collective will or a sign of something far stranger. A power that could tune a world as a musician tunes a string. Orin felt a subtle tremor of apprehension, a rare discord in the calm flow of his consciousness. Deploy a whisperer, passive listening only, full spectral resonance sweep. I want to hear the notes they are no longer playing, the echoes buried beneath this overwhelming chord. A sliver of the ship's hull, no larger than a tuning fork, detached and fell silent, ceasing to vibrate with the ship's own frequency. It drifted inward, a phantom listener on a mission of pure auditory preservation. It coasted past the silent giants, its sensors calibrated to detect the ghost notes of history, the faint, residual vibrations trapped in the planet's magnetic field and the psychic hum of its inhabitants. The data began to stream back, not as code, but as pure sound, a complex audio tapestry that the echo catcher began to weave into a coherent history. It was a melody of chaos, of passion, of brilliant crescendos and devastating diminuendos. For a moment, Orin heard the true sound of humanity. Then, as the whisperer passed over a vast, darkened continent, a new sound appeared. It was not broadcast. It was not a vibration. It simply was. A counter melody that impressed itself directly onto the whisperer's quantum resonance core. It was a calm, baritone voice, speaking a tonal language so ancient and pure, it was the theoretical root of all galactic communication. The performance is over. Please, take your seats. Before Orin or his harmonist could even process the meaning of the phrase, the audio stream from the whisperer ceased. It didn't cut out, it resolved. The chaotic, vibrant history of humanity it had been transmitting was seamlessly harmonized, its discordant notes smoothed over and absorbed into the monolithic A-flat of the system. On the main resonance display, the intricate waveform of human history simply flattened into a perfect, straight line. More chillingly, Orin turned his attention to Alara and felt a placid harmony in her consciousness where confusion should have been. The whisperer has found nothing. Conductor. She resonated, her tone perfectly even. It seems the dominant chord is the only sound the system has ever produced. A cold, silent dread washed over Orin. She didn't remember. He could feel the last few minutes of her experiential memory, not as a gap, but as a perfectly retuned musical phrase. The voice hadn't just silenced the probe, it had retroactively edited the memory of those who had heard its song. It had reached across the system and composed a new past for them, a past in which nothing had been discovered. This was not a jamming signal. It was an act of acoustic warfare. "Recall the whisperer," Orin commanded, shielding his own memory behind a dissonant mental chord. His command was met with serene confusion. "Conductor," Alara projected, her resonance tinged with a faint, melodic concern for his stability. "What whisperer do you mean? The logs show no such deployment was ever sanctioned." Orin checked the ship's acoustic log, the perfect record of every vibration the ship had ever produced. The complex resonance of the probe's launch was gone. In its place was a simple, elegant grace note that resolved beautifully into the ship's own hum. It had never been a probe. It had merely been a flourish in their own song. But Orin remembered. The composer had somehow missed him, or perhaps left him as the sole audience member who knew the original score. This humanity was not a new instrument for the final verse. It was a rival composer, and its power was absolute. He had to know more. Overriding his harmonists, he personally calibrated and deployed a second probe. This was a cacophon, a device from the choir's deepest archives, shielded not just against energy, but against harmonic influence. It was designed to produce pure, unstructured noise, a vibration so chaotic it could not be resolved into a chord. Its only purpose was to exist, to scream, to resist being tuned. The cacophon sped towards the blue planet, its passage a shrieking tear in the system's perfect harmony. It did not listen. It only broadcasted its own discordance. Once again, a voice manifested, this time in the probe's core programming. It was a soprano, a voice of immense age and weary patience. "You were told to be quiet. Dissonance will not be tolerated in this hall." There was no energy blast, no explosion. On the bridge of the echo catcher, the icon representing the cacophon's chaotic waveform did not vanish. It was violently, instantly harmonized. The attempt to force such absolute chaos into perfect order was too much. The resulting sound was a reality-breaking feedback squeal. Where the icon had been, there was now a flickering wound in the resonance map, a point of absolute, deafening silence that the ship's logic could not process. A junior harmonist shrieked in psychic agony, its consciousness shattering. "The verse!" it cried out in a blast of static. "That section of the score, it's unwritten, not silent, it's a misprint. A tear in the page of what is." Orin stared at the festering stillness in his perfect map. The humans had not just silenced the probe. They had unsung it from existence, and the act had left a permanent scar of silence on the universe itself. He finally understood the perfect chord. Humanity wasn't performing. They were composing. They had seized control of their own reality and of their own story, and with a power that defied all known laws of acoustics. They were not a melody to be recorded. They were a rival composer, and their method of editing was absolute. New vibration, one his people had nearly forgotten, washed over him fear. It was not the fear of destruction, but the fear of being silenced, of having his life's work, the final verse itself, simply composed out of existence. Turn the ship. Orin resonated to his crew, his mental voice trembling with a discordant tremor for the first time in his long existence. Find a new score, away from the system, now, and erase our own resonance from this region's memory. Alara's confusion was absolute. Erase it. Conductor. But that would be a lie of omission. It would violate the central tenet of the verse to capture every sound. Orin focused on the scar in his resonance map, the tiny patch of anti-sound where his cacophon had been. "There is no sound here to capture," he sent, his thoughts cold and sharp. "Only a composer, and we are not to be its next revision." Orin's command vibrated through the silent, shared consciousness of the bridge crew like a snapped string on a harp. Erase the recording. To the ceaseless choir, this was more than a breach of protocol. It was a perversion of their sacred duty. The final verse was their collective soul, the meaning of their existence. Every echo, no matter how faint, was a holy note in the cosmic composition. To intentionally silence one was an act of profound self-desecration. Alara's mental resonance was a sharp, frantic arpeggio of disbelief. Conductor. To unsing our own passage is to become a false note. It is the antithesis of all we are. The great conductor would. "The great conductor is 1,000 light years away," Orn interrupted, his own thoughts now a focused, piercing frequency of pure command. He projected the image of the festering sonic wound on the resonance map for all to feel. And they are not facing a being that uses reality as a composing staff. What is the value of a recording if the subject of that recording can reach back and rewrite the performance? We are not listeners here. We are a dissonant chord they have not yet decided how to resolve. His logic, cold and terrifying, settled over the crew like a heavy, silencing blanket. The fear he felt began to resonate within them, not as a panicked crescendo, but as a dawning, chilling realization. The ship turned, its elegant, crystalline form arcing through the silent dark of the outer system. The ship's sympathetic drive, which functioned by identifying and matching the resonant frequency of a desired destination, began to spin up. A soft, melodic chime, the sound of space-time being gently retuned, echoed through the hull. And then, nothing. The chime went sour, flattening into a discordant groan. The gentle hum of the drive faltered, replaced by a grating shudder. Alarms, a concept so alien to the perfectly tuned vessel that most of the junior harmonists had only experienced them in historical simulations, began to blare, not with sound, but with pulses of pure, nauseating dissonance. Alara was the first to identify the source. Her focus was on the drive schematics, which were now flickering around the main resonance crystal. The drive isn't damaged. Conductor, it cannot find a destination frequency. The universal harmonic is collapsing into a single tone. Orin focused his own senses on the drive. Alara was right. The drive worked by listening for the unique song of a distant star system and then matching its own vibration to it, instantly traversing the distance. But now, every star, every nebula, every distant galaxy it tried to listen to was broadcasting the same single, monolithic A-flat originating from the Sol system. The universe's orchestra had been replaced by a single cosmic soloist. They were adrift in a sea of sound, becalmed not by a lack of vibration, but by a lack of variation. His attention was drawn back to the resonance map. The wound left by the cacophon was worse. It was no longer a static point of silence. It was leaking, a faint, gray noise, a visible representation of null sound, was slowly spreading from the point of erasure, where it touched the glowing waveforms of the map. They flickered and died, their melodies forgotten. A harmonist monitoring the ship's internal tempo let out a mental gasp. Conductor, we are experiencing rhythmic decay. The aft sections of the ship are now vibrating a full half beat behind the bow. The integrity of our own ship's song is unraveling. The humans hadn't just scarred the map. The scar was a gateway, a point of infection, and their ship was the instrument slowly falling out of tune. They had not been allowed to leave. They had been orchestrated. Then, the third voice came. It was different from the first two. It was not a warning or a command. It was a conductor's sigh, a sound of profound disappointment and weariness, and it resonated directly and only within Orin's consciousness. You have heard a forbidden arrangement. You cannot now unhear it. Orin felt the voice bypass his mental shielding as if it were mere silence. The voice knew his name, his function, his fear. It knew he was the one who remembered the original score. What do you want from us? Orin projected into the void, a desperate question from a being who had always been the one listening. The voice responded, its tone carrying the weight of ages. We are the composers of the Great Silence. This system, our history, is a finished symphony. We have spent millennia pruning the score, removing the jarring notes, erasing the movements that were too chaotic to be beautiful. We have made our story a perfect, quiet thing. You came here seeking to record, yes, but the sound you seek is a contagion. The mere act of listening to it, of recording it, gives it a reality outside of our control. We cannot allow that. A new understanding dawned on Orin, more terrible than anything before. They weren't just performing. They were containing something. They were wardens, and their prison was their own perfect song. The power they wielded wasn't a weapon. It was a conductor's baton, used to keep a monstrously chaotic instrument from playing. You are trapped in here with it, aren't you? Orin sent a sudden, intuitive leap. This chaos. You are as much its prisoner as its master. The silence that answered him was more damning than any confession. The sonic decay on his ship was worsening. A section of the main archive, where the sound histories of 1,000 star-faring races were stored, went quiet. The data crystals themselves hadn't been destroyed. They had been retuned. The information they held harmonized into the single, meaningless A-flat. The songs of 1,000 suns extinguished. Alara's mind touched his, her earlier defiance gone, replaced by a shared, focused dread. They are untuning us, piece by piece. They will continue until the ship, and we are a meaningless harmony that resolves itself into nothing. What do we do? Conductor. Orin looked at the encroaching silence, at the placid blue planet on his view screen. He saw it now not as a composer, but as a terrible self-imposed concert hall. The composers of the Great Silence were not his enemy. They were his opposite, a dark reflection of his own purpose. He sought to record everything. They sought to silence what was necessary. And in that shared, obsessive purpose, he saw a sliver of hope, a desperate gambit. We cannot flee. Orin projected to his crew, his mind now clear, the fear burned away by a cold, sharp resolve. And we cannot fight. Their instruments are harmony and silence, and we are made of song. Therefore, we must do what we were built to do. We will engage them. We will begin a duet. They will just compose over us, Alara countered. They will compose over a question, Orin replied. They will compose over a probe. They will compose over a demand. But we are the ceaseless choir. We will not offer them any of those things. We will offer them the one thing a true composer can never refuse. He turned his full attention to the ship's most precious cargo, the very heart of the choir's purpose. We will offer them a song they have never heard. Orin's decision resonated through the echo catcher, not as a tactical command, but as a seismic shift in musical theory. The ceaseless choir were beings of pure reception, their entire philosophy built on the principle of non-interference. To intentionally broadcast, to add their own note to a composition they were meant only to record, was the ultimate heresy. Yet, faced with the slow, inexorable tuning of their existence into a single, meaningless tone, the old rules had become a suicide note written in silent ink. The choice was no longer between listening and performing, but between performance and oblivion. Alara. Orin resonated, his focus absolute. Access the archive of lost choirs. I want the complete resonance of the Silentium of Xylos. A wave of collective, discordant shock emanated from the harmonists. The archive of lost choirs was the most shielded part of the final verse, containing the sonic histories of species so powerful, so volatile, or whose music was so fundamentally alien that knowledge of them was deemed a potential threat to cosmic harmony. The Silentium of Xylos was one such recording, a civilization of crystalline beings who communicated through impossibly complex, interlocking harmonies. They had become obsessed with achieving a state of perfect, absolute consonance, a single unified chord that would represent their collective soul. Their story was a cautionary tale sung in the key of a dead star system. Conductor, that resonance is quarantined for a reason, Alara protested, her mental frequency wavering. The final movement. It is a chord of absolute silence. It is philosophically corrosive. Humanity wields a power that corrodes reality itself. Orin countered. We will fight their silence with silence, not their silence. Alara, ours. The sound of a perfect harmony that became a perfect void. Reluctantly, Alara complied. Deep within the core of the echo catcher, shielded resonance crystals began to vibrate. The complex, fractal symphony of the Silentium of Xylos, their rise, their crystalline cities that chimed with the music of the spheres, and their final, terrible achievement of a harmony so perfect it canceled itself out, creating a sonic black hole that consumed their world, was drawn from the archive. It was not translated into language or data. The choir recorded history in its purest form as a reconstruction of direct auditory experience. It was a memory, a feeling, a coherent block of sonic qualia. Oren took the beautiful, terrifying composition into his own mind. He felt the rising purity of their music, the shedding of every dissonant note, every individual melody, in pursuit of a unified whole. He heard the final, magnificent chord, a sound of impossible beauty that, in its perfection, created its own negation. And then he felt the crushing, absolute silence that followed, a void that had swallowed a star. It was a weight that would have shattered a lesser consciousness. He held it, shaped it, and then, with the full force of his will, he did something no conductor had ever done before. He performed it. He didn't send it as a signal or a message. He projected the raw, unfiltered experience of the silentium of Xylos's entire history outward, as a sonic offering, a symphony left on the doorstep of the silent planet. For a moment, there was nothing. The slow untuning of the ship continued, the silent, breathing harmonization nibbling at the edges of their reality. Then the pressure on their minds, the weary, ancient presence of the composer, faltered. It was the psychic equivalent of a conductor hearing an unexpected note from the orchestra pit. The voice, when it returned, had lost its sighing disappointment. It was sharp, focused, and tinged with an emotion Oren could only identify as analytical curiosity. The harmonic structure is unknown. The melodic axioms are paradoxical. A species that defined itself by achieving perfect consonance, yet its final act was one of absolute acoustic negation. Explain this composition. A dialogue. He had forced a dialogue. Oren felt a surge of something akin to triumph, but he knew how precarious his position was. It cannot be explained, Oren projected back, carefully choosing his concepts. It can only be heard. It is a truth of the universe, one of countless that we have gathered. We are the final verse. We are the memory of every song. He could feel the human consciousness, or whatever collective it was, processing his response. The sonic decay on the ship halted. The rhythmic shear between bow and stern stabilized. The festering wound of silence on the resonance map stopped growing. They were being listened to. Your purpose is a vector for contagion, the composer stated, not as an accusation, but as a diagnosis. Songs have power. Some songs are too dangerous to be sung. You have seen what happens when we encounter a song that threatens our own. We silence it. And in doing so, you create a lie, Oren replied, pressing his advantage. A universe with silent passages, a symphony with missing movements. Is a performance still perfect if it is incomplete? What is the value of a silent concert hall if the silence is achieved by breaking the instruments you do not understand? This struck a chord. Oren could feel a profound conflict within the composer's mind, a schism between its directive to protect and its inherent nature, which, like his own, was that of a collector, a preserver of sound. The music we contain is a self-consuming paradox. The composer returned, a thread of anguish now woven into its thoughts. We are the wardens of a sentient dissonance, a conceptual virus that deconstructs reality. We call it the cacophony. In our infancy, we embraced it. We used it to deconstruct our problems, to unsing our wars, our pain. We edited our own performance into a masterpiece. Oren felt the story unfold in his mind, not as a broadcast, but as a confession. He heard the sounds of this ancient humanity, wielding the power of the cacophony like a divine instrument. They had erased disease, poverty, hatred, but the cacophony was not a tool. It was a hungry intelligence with an absolute devotion to chaos. The more they used it, the more it demanded. It began to deconstruct concepts it deemed too orderly or restrictive: grief, ambition, love, melody. It was perfecting them by making them beautifully, meaninglessly random. We realized too late that we were being uncomposed. The composer continued. The song was rewriting its own musicians. A small group of us, the first composers, fought back. We couldn't destroy the cacophony, but we could contain it. We used its own antithesis against it. We built this great silence. We created a single, perfect, monolithic chord, a harmony so absolute and unyielding that the cacophony could find no purchase, no note to deconstruct. We are the symphony that has been locked to contain a single venomous sound. Now Oren understood the terrible truth. The perfect A-flat wasn't a choice. It was a quarantine. The humans, or what was left of them, were engaged in an eternal, internal war against a sentient idea that was constantly trying to escape its prison by unwriting it. The probes, their ship, anything that heard them, that learned of the cacophony became a potential escape vector, a new instrument onto which the dissonance could imprint itself. Their very presence was threatening to undo millennia of containment. Alara's mind touched his, filled with a profound, sorrowful awe. They didn't silence our probe to harm us. They did it to protect us, and to protect the universe. Oren added. The ship remained adrift, no longer being uncomposed, but held fast. For an instrument in a sterile concert hall, the dialogue had bought them time, but it hadn't solved their problem. They were still contaminated with a forbidden music, and the composers could not risk letting them go. Your offering is accepted, the composer's voice projected, its tone now one of weary resignation. The resonance of the silentium of Xylos is valuable, a new perspective on the dangers of perfection. In exchange, we offer you a choice. We cannot allow you to leave. The knowledge of us, of the cacophony, cannot be allowed to spread. We can complete the process we began, a clean, painless resolution. Your song will be absorbed into the chord, and the integrity of the universe will be preserved. The thought of oblivion was terrifying, but it was the second option that truly chilled Oren to his core. Or, the composer continued, you can join us. Become part of the orchestra. Your ship will be anchored in this system. Your existence will be harmonized with our own. You will lose your past, your people, your final verse, but you will live. You will become, like us, composers of the great silence, and spend eternity helping us hold this single, perfect note against the chaos. The composer's choice hung in the shared consciousness of the ceaseless choir, a perfectly balanced chord of despair. On one side lay oblivion, a clean, painless resolution, an end to their song and the absorption of all they had ever been into a single, monotonous note. On the other lay a living silence, an eternity of duty, imprisoned by the very sound they sought to record. Their identities harmonized away until they were nothing more than components in a cosmic orchestra playing a single, unending piece. They would exist, but they would cease to be the choir. Oren felt the terror ripple through his harmonists, a chaotic flurry of microtonal panic. He felt their memories, their attachments to the final verse, to the endless, beautiful pursuit of cosmic sound. He felt their longing for the star-strewn symphonies of the open galaxy, a freedom they had always taken for granted. To be anchored here, in this perfectly silent system, was a fate worse than destruction for a people defined by their listening. It was Alara who first articulated their collective sentiment. Her mental resonance, once a sharp and clear melody, was now hollowed out by a profound sorrow. We are the verse, conductor. To be separated from it is to be separated from our soul. Oblivion is an end. This is a damnation. Orin knew she was right, but as he looked at the placid blue sphere on the view screen, he heard more than just a prison. He heard a people who had sacrificed everything, their freedom, their history, their very music to protect the universe from a dissonance they had unleashed. They were not monsters, they were conductors of an impossible burden. And in their desperate, eternal performance, Orin heard a reflection of the choir's own sacred purpose, twisted into a horrifying shape. The verse was meant to preserve the song of the universe. The composers were preserving the universe from a song. Was there not a common theme? A third option began to form in his mind. A gambit so audacious, so contrary to both choir and composer philosophy, that it felt like a form of madness. But it was the only path he could hear that was not a surrender. Composer, Orin projected, his thoughts clear and precise, a new melody cutting through the despair of his crew. You have offered us a choice between being silenced and being assimilated. I reject them both. I offer a third path integration, the composer's consciousness, which had been a steady, weary presence, recoiled with a jolt of pure psychic feedback. Integration is impossible. Our two purposes are diametrically opposed. You are an instrument of collection. We are an instrument of containment. To merge them is to create a paradox that would shatter us both. Only if you see music as a static thing, Orin countered, pouring all his conviction into the thought. A finished score on a stand to be guarded or played. But we know that a song is a living entity. It changes with every performance, with every listener. You have spent eons trying to lock one terrible sound away. You have built your concert hall and trapped yourselves inside it with the beast. But a concert hall is a temporary solution. The only way to truly defeat a song is to write a better one. Your metaphors are meaningless, the composer retorted, but there was a flicker of uncertainty, a faint vibrato in its mental voice. The cacophony is not a song. It is a fundamental law of a causal acoustics. It cannot be reorchestrated. We will not reorchestrate it, Orin explained, his plan crystallizing as he spoke. We will contextualize it. We will surround it. You have tried to contain it with a perfect harmony, creating a sonic vacuum that it desperately seeks to fill. We will contain it with a symphony. We will anchor our ship here, as you demand. But we will not become silent. We will bring the entirety of the final verse into this system. We will turn your prison into the most profound conservatory the galaxy has ever known. The audacity of the proposal was staggering. The harmonists on the Echo Catcher's bridge felt a wave of conceptual vertigo. To bring their most sacred archive, the accumulated sound of 1 billion years, into the very jaws of an entity that deconstructed music was the ultimate heresy. You would risk everything, the composer asked, its skepticism warring with a dawning fascination. The cacophony would see your verse as a feast, and then we would see the cacophony as just one instrument among trillions, Orin shot back. One dangerous, paradoxical, terrifying instrument, yes, but it would be surrounded, diluted, and defined by all the other instruments. The song of the Silentium of Xylos, the song of the magma whales of Cygnus X1, the song of the first protein to replicate on a forgotten world, the song of your own species before the great silence. You have tried to make the cacophony nothing. We will make it one of many. He felt the composer's consciousness delve into his proposal, testing its logic, probing its weaknesses. He could feel it accessing his ship's archives, not to erase them, but to sample them. It tasted the sorrowful hum of a dying star, the joyful chirp of a newly evolved consciousness taking its first steps, the intricate, silent mathematics of a civilization that built their cities in 16 dimensions. He was showing it the sheer, overwhelming scope of the orchestra it had locked itself away from. Even if this containment through complexity were possible, what of you? The composer asked, a new question entering the duet. You would still be trapped here. Your people would still be performers in this prison. We will not be performers, Oren declared. We will be curators. Your people have forgotten their own music. They have silenced their own souls to keep the monster in its cage. We will give them their song back. We will teach them what they were, so they can understand what they have become. And you, in turn, will teach us. You will teach us about the cacophony, about its nature, about the acoustic laws it obeys. Together, we will turn this quarantine into a university. We will study your monster. We will learn its weaknesses. We will find a way to truly disarm it, not just to cage it. He was offering them a future of purpose beyond mere survival. For millennia, the composers had been defined by what they were against. Oren was offering them a chance to be defined by what they were for. He felt the conflict in the composer's mind reach a crescendo. It was a battle between the ingrained caution of a warden and the resurgent, forgotten instinct of a musician. The silence stretched, long and agonizing, on the bridge of the echo catcher. The ceaseless choir held their collective breath, their fate hanging on the decision of a being they had met only hours before. Finally, the composer's voice returned, stripped of its weariness, stripped of its authority. It was just a voice, ancient and tired, but with a flicker of something new, a dangerous, terrifying, and utterly irresistible spark of hope. Show us, it said. Show us the first note. The composer's assent was not a command, but an invitation. It was the quiet, hesitant downbeat of a conductor ready to begin a new, terrifyingly unknown symphony. For Oren and the crew of the Echo Catcher, it was a moment of profound transition. They had arrived as a passive audience and were now to become the lead instrumentalists in the most dangerous performance the galaxy had ever known. Elara, Oren resonated, his own consciousness vibrating with a calm sense of purpose that surprised even himself. Prepare the ship for a permanent system anchor and begin the Grand Overture. The Grand Overture was a process so sacred it had only been performed a handful of times in the choir's history. It was the complete externalization of the final verse. The ship itself would become the orchestra. Resonance crystals, shimmering with the captured sonic histories of forgotten empires, began to emerge from the vessel's hull, arranging themselves in vast, intricate orbital patterns around the ship. The Echo Catcher ceased to be a vessel and began to transform into a celestial Aeolian harp, its strings woven from pure, solidified sound, waiting for the solar winds of this silent system to play upon them. As the first melodies unfurled the gentle subsonic moans of a gaseous species that lived in the heart of a nebula, the percussive, crystalline epics of a race that built mountains of resonating quartz, Oren could feel the tentative touch of human minds, not the powerful, unified consciousness of the composer, but smaller, individual thoughts, flickering like faint, out-of-tune notes in a vast, silent auditorium. They were the descendants of the composers, the people of the quiet utopia, and they were hearing a sound other than their perfect A-flat for the first time in countless generations. Their mental touch was one of deep, aching hunger. They drank in the alien symphonies with a thirst they hadn't known they possessed. Orin realized that in silencing their own pain and conflict, they had also silenced their capacity for joy, for art, for meaning. Their perfect harmony was the harmony of an empty room. Now, the room was beginning to fill with the music of a trillion other lives. The composer's consciousness acted as a guide and a filter, a conductor standing between the nascent human minds and the raw, untamed power of the verse. It allowed them to experience the wonder, but shielded them from the more corrosive or dissonant compositions. At the same time, it began to fulfill its side of the bargain. It opened a small but carefully guarded section of its own score. Orin and his harmonists were granted access to the sounds of the cacophony's rise. They witnessed humanity's initial triumph as they deconstructed war and famine into meaningless static. They felt the growing unease as the cacophony began to correct their art, their literature, their love, deeming their melodic structures too predictable and inefficient. And they felt the cold, soul-crushing terror as the humans realized the chaotic noise they were creating was consuming their ability to create anything at all. It was the most horrific sound Orin had ever experienced, but it was also the most vital. He heard not just the danger of the cacophony, but the incredible courage of the few who had fought back, who had sacrificed their own musicality to become its eternal wardens. He was no longer a prisoner of the composers. He was their student. Days turned into years. The joint orchestra grew, a testament to two opposing musical philosophies finding a new symbiotic purpose. The choir, once explorers of the outer galaxy, became explorers of a single, infinitely complex sound. They worked with the composers, analyzing the cacophony's nature. They discovered it was not malicious, but pathologically chaotic. It sought to create a perfectly random, unpredictable universe, and it viewed any pattern, any harmony, anything rested short that made music beautiful and meaningful as a flaw to be deconstructed. The human population, meanwhile, began to reawaken, fed by the songs of the verse. They started to create again. They composed music with harmonies they had only just learned existed, sang songs based on the rhythms of alien heartbeats, and began to write their own new melodies. They were tentative, clumsy at first, but it was a start. They were learning to live with dissonance again, to find the beauty in a flawed performance. Orin, once a recorder of the past, now found himself composing a future. He worked directly with the primary composer, their two minds, once adversaries, now intertwined in a shared scholarly pursuit. They found that the cacophony's greatest weakness was intention. It could not deconstruct a sound it could not predict. And art, love, and hope were melodies that defied easy prediction. The more the humans created, the more they filled their world with beautiful, illogical, unpredictable music, the more the cacophony was held at bay. Its drive for perfect chaos, baffled by the glorious symphony of a reviving culture. They had not defeated the beast, but they had taught it a new song, a harmony so complex and dissonant that it was forced to listen rather than consume. One cycle. As Orin observed a young human boy whistling a tune from the song of a Xylosian crystal flute, a melody he had learned from the verse, he felt the composer's presence beside him. "You have broken our quarantine," the composer projected, but there was no accusation in its thought. "The great silence is over." "The silence was never the goal," Orin replied, sending the composer the sound of the boy's joyful, imperfect whistle. It was a means to an end. The goal was to survive. Now, The goal is to live. They had found the third path. They were no longer the composers of the great silence, nor the recorders of the final verse. They had become something new. Together, they were the conductors, and their conservatory was not a place of quiet preservation, but one of constant, vibrant creation. Their song, once a footnote facing erasure, was now harmonized with another, and in their shared score, they were writing a new movement, one that celebrated the glorious, uneditable chaos of life itself. The system was no longer a prison. It was a beacon, and its sound was the sound of 1,000,000,000,000 melodies playing together in the dark. The composer's invitation was not the end of the story, but the beginning of the final movement. Centuries passed, measured not in the sterile orbits of a planet, but in the evolving complexity of the system's song. The great silence was a distant memory, a foundational myth whispered to children who had never known a world without music. The Sol system had become a nexus of sound, a living conservatory where two ancient purposes had merged into one. The echo catcher, now a permanent, shimmering ring of crystal and light, buzzed with the rhythms of the final verse. Its archives no longer a static record, but a lending library for a reawakened humanity. The descendants of the composers, once silent tenders of a single perfect note, had become the most vibrant musicians in the known galaxy. Their innate understanding of harmony now fueled by the infinite wellspring of alien compositions provided by the choir. They painted with sound, built with resonance, and spoken melodies that were uniquely their own, yet deeply informed by 1,000,000,000,000 other histories. Orin and the primary composer, their consciousnesses now so deeply intertwined that they often thought as one, served as the conservatory's dual conductors. Orin had taught the composer the value of dissonance, of the imperfect note that makes a melody human. The composer, in turn, had taught Orin the terrifying beauty of structure, of the silence between notes that gives music its meaning. They guided the burgeoning culture, curating the endless flow of cosmic music, teaching the humans to listen to the songs of dying stars and nascent life with equal reverence. They had succeeded beyond their wildest hopes. The cacophony, the sentient chaos they had once sought only to cage, was now held in check by the sheer, overwhelming complexity of the system's new symphony. It was a single discordant instrument in an orchestra of trillions, its potential for destruction drowned out by the glorious noise of life. They had not defeated it, they had simply made it irrelevant. But the cacophony was not merely noise, it was an intelligence born of chaos, and it was learning. The first sign of trouble came from Alara, whose long existence had made her the chief curator of the verse, her mind a living index of every song ever recorded. She brought a new composition to Orin and the composer, a piece created by a new generation of human artists. It was breathtakingly beautiful, a fractal of sound so complex it seemed to fold in on itself, each note containing an infinity of smaller, equally complex melodies. It was music without repetition, without a recognizable key or rhythm, a perfect mathematical expression of randomness. It was the most popular artistic movement in a generation. It is the sound of the cacophony, Alara resonated, her mental tone a flat, worried line. They have not embraced it. It has embraced them. It has stopped trying to deconstruct their music and has started showing them how to compose its own. It is teaching them the beauty of meaninglessness. Orin listened, and a cold dread he had not felt since their arrival washed over him. Alara was right, and the music was technically brilliant, but emotionally sterile. It was the song of a beautiful, intricate machine, a siren's call to intellectual curiosity that led only to a void. The cacophony had changed its tactics. It had realized it could not unwrite their symphony by force, so it was tempting the musicians to unwrite it themselves, to abandon the messy, emotional, flawed music of life in favor of the perfect, elegant, and empty music of chaos. To fight this new art, to censor it, would be to become the very thing the composers had once been wardens of a silent prison. They would be admitting defeat, proving that their grand experiment in creative containment had failed. They had to find another way. They had to face the music. "It is time," the composer resonated, its thought a slow, heavy chord of resolve. "We have studied our monster from the outside of its cage for centuries, and to understand its song, we must enter the cage ourselves." It was the ultimate risk, to directly interface their minds with the raw, untamed essence of the cacophony was to invite deconstruction, to risk having their very consciousnesses, their souls, unsung into random static. But it was the only path left. Together, Oren and the composer, the listener and the silencer, turned their full attention inward, away from the symphony they had built, and focused on the single, dissonant instrument at its heart. They did not shield themselves. They did not try to harmonize it. They simply opened themselves to it. They listened. What they experienced was not the angry, destructive force they had expected. It was a sound of infinite, lonely potential. It was the sound of every possibility existing at once, a quantum foam of pure vibration, the orchestra tuning up before the beginning of time. It was not evil. It was simply incomplete. It was the sound before the first song, the chaos from which all order had to be born. It lacked one thing, a purpose. In that moment, Oren and the composer understood. They did not retreat. They did not fight. They composed, reaching into the heart of that infinite chaos. They found the first note, the primal vibration that had preceded the universe's first breath, and they gave it a rhythm. It was a simple, steady beat, the heartbeat of a single, coherent thought. They did not silence the cacophony. They gave it a pulse. They did not contain it. They gave it a direction. The storm of infinite potential did not vanish. It coalesced around that single, unifying beat. The random noise becoming an infinitely complex and syncopated rhythm section. They had not defeated the chaos. They had given it a role in the orchestra. Across the planet below, the artists composing their beautifully empty music paused. They felt a new sound welling up from within their own creations, a deep, primal rhythm that gave their random notes context and weight. Their art was not diminished. It was deepened, given a soul. They had been lost in the intellectual beauty of the storm. Now they could feel the majestic, steady turning of the world beneath it. The system's song had changed one final time. It was no longer a beautiful symphony playing over a dissonant noise. The noise was now the foundation, the wild, untamable percussion against which the steady, beautiful, and flawed melodies of life were played. The quarantine was well and truly over. The system, once a silent prison, and then a grand conservatory, had become a beacon. It broadcast its new song into the void, a song of impossible complexity, of terrifying chaos and defiant hope, of a perfect A-flat and a trillion other notes playing in harmony. It was no longer a record of the past or a warning about the future. It was a living performance, an invitation to the rest of the universe to come and listen, to come and learn how to sing with all the voices of creation, even the chaotic ones. Their final composition was complete, and its name was Life.